This is a Defocus Media production. What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Daryl Glover.
And I'm Dr. Jennifer Lyerly, resident optometry nerd.
And welcome to Defocus Media, optometry's #1 podcast, where we discuss the hottest topics, latest technology, eyewear, practice management, and more. So sit back, relax, and defocus.
Hey everybody, we're so excited to have you joining in with us tonight because we are doing something a little bit different, a little bit unique. We're not talking about the science or the theory. We're talking about real world, in the trenches practicing with 4 totally different perspectives from doctors across the country and even in Canada. So as always, we've got an interactive show on the live stream. So post your questions, post your comments. We want to get your feedback too, because this is not supposed to be a pretty discussion. We want to talk about the nitty and gritty and sometimes the not so fun aspects of treating dry eye so that we can all grow and improve our efficiencies and our patient outcomes, most importantly.
Absolutely, Jen. And I'm super excited because we have our podcast family on with us this evening. We have Dr. Maria Sampoulos and Dr. Harbir Sayan. These are 2 great individuals in the eye care industry that's highly respected, key opinion leaders, consultants, you name it. These guys are doing it all. So super excited to hang out with you guys today and pick your brains as well, along with the lovely Dr. Jennifer Lyerly. So we can really put on our Opto Nerds hats today and just really dive in and have some fun.
Before we jump into the conversation, I did want to give a shout out to Alcon, who has been so generous in supporting this conversation. If you guys want to learn more about some of their products, you can always head to sustaineyelocks.com. And I'm sure that's probably going to come up a little bit later on today when we're talking about some technology. But first off, I just want to you guys you know us, we kind of introduced ourselves and we've got our names at the bottom, but I don't know if you guys really know about our practices. So I'd love just to kind of go around in a circle and share a little bit about where do you practice? What kind of practice is it? How many patients do you see any day? Like, just paint the picture. Daryl, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Jen. Well, I practice with my doctor. I always like to say we're the leader in eye care, the #1 outfit out there. But I practice in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area, and it's full scope optometry. I see about 20 patients a day. It's glasses, contacts, medical base, dry eyes, glaucoma, OCT, visual field, you name it. We practice full scope optometry, and every day I love it. We have every eyewear designer you can think of, and we have about 8 exam lanes. So we're constantly moving, constantly saving eyes each day. So that's it in a nutshell, Jen.
Maria, what about yourself?
Hi, Dr. Maria Sampoulos. I'm the founder of Corporate Optometry on Facebook. I have a corporate practice, 4 Eyes. It's a little newer location. We don't see as many patients because it's a newer location, but we're able to practice the way we want. I also have a private practice, seeing about 20 patients a day. Full scope as well. Dry eye is a big part of my practice, and it's been a great builder because a lot of doctors ignore it, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Harbir, what about yourself?
Hello, I'm Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you guys for having me. As Jen mentioned, I'm practicing up in Vancouver, Canada, and I practice out of 2 different types of settings, actually. We have a sublease practice next door to LensCrafters, and we have a private independent practice as well. So 2 different approaches to optometry. However, in the exam room, we try to keep it about as similar as we can, trying to practice full scope optometry across the board, prescribing to the scope that we're able to here. And dry eye is definitely something big that I've been spending more time doing over the last 12 to 18 months. Implementing it more in both practices, the sublease and the private practice.
It's so interesting. Both you guys have both your independent practice and you also practice in more of a corporate setting. Do you feel like you practice differently between those offices?
No, I practice the same. Mm-hmm. A lot of doctors feel that way as well. So it's not the 4 walls that you practice; it's the doctor that wants to do and the patients that you have.
100%. Yeah, absolutely agree. The significant difference comes when the patient leaves the exam room and who you're handing them off to. but the recommendations within the exam room are 100% the same across the board. In fact, I do more dry eye in the sublease than I do in the private practice, just based on the patient demographic. So
I believe that. I'm also in the Raleigh community, not that far from Daryl's office, but I'm in a independent practice. We do specialty contact lenses and some myopia control and vision therapy as well. So kind of more of a small boutique practice in that sense. And then Daryl and I, we actually see probably a lot of the same community of patients where if they need a specialty contact lens, they're coming to me. If they're looking for a lot of eyewear, like a shopping warehouse, I'm like, oh, they have a big selection down there. So it makes a great referral source for each other too.
Absolutely. I'm curious, what does everyone's demographic look like? I mean, I can tell you for me, being in the Research Triangle Park, I'm surrounded by a lot of tech savvy people, pharmaceutical companies, a lot of medical professionals, because there's a couple medical schools not too far away, a couple law schools, so a lot of attorneys or law students, and just colleges in general. So I see a lot of pretty much of everything, really. And even down the street from where I practice, there's now three adult 55 plus living communities. So I'm getting to see pretty much everything you could think of that walks underneath the sun for the most part. But I'm curious to know what demographic you guys serve in your practices.
Yeah, so I live in Cranston, Rhode Island. The practices are in Cranston. In Rhode Island, the joke is that nobody leaves 20 minutes. So if it's 20-minute drive, they don't, so there are colleges and things like that, but we see a few, not as many as we should for students. But we have a lot of 55 and older, and a lot of families and a lot of patients that are going to be long-term patients, because it seems like people that live in Rhode Island, they kind of don't leave Rhode Island. They stay. So we see a lot of families the area that I am, it seems like there's more Asian patients. It seems like that area of Cranston is more of the community of Asians.
First off, I want to say hi to Dr. Sal Javraj. I just noticed that he said hello. If we're talking about dry eye, Sal's definitely a well-known figure, especially in Canada. So what's up, Sal? The question about demographics, our Abbotsford office, which is our sublease, is near a university there. We do see a fair number of university students. But again, like yourself, Daryl, it's really pretty much everything under the sun, from practically, newborns up till 100-year-old. In our other practice, our independent practice, there are a lot of new residential developments, townhouses and things like that in the area. So we tend to get a lot of younger families, which we love. So I feel like on average there we're seeing people who are kind of in their 30s and 40s and they have kids 5 to 10 years old. That's pretty standard for us on a day-to-day basis.
Fantastic.
So I know, Maria, you mentioned when you were talking about your patients that dry eye is definitely important to what you do. I want to get a feel for you guys. How important is dry eye in your daily practice? Do you prioritize it? Do you only bring it up when a patient complains? And how do you go about diagnosing it in your office?
I bring it up on every patient. Now with COVID, it is a great opportunity to start dry eye in your practice. A lot of digital eye strain, a lot of eye from computers as well, masks, things like that. That has been an issue. I'll explain some patients don't really know what it is. And I'll, bring up some signs and symptoms, and they'll be like, yeah, I have that. And then I'll explain to them, what type of dry eye they have, and what my recommendations are, and how there are different steps. It's not one solution for all the types of dry eye. So then I'll do a follow-up visit in a month, and I have the protocol set up in my office. And I've been doing it for a little while now. So for me, it's been easy. It's kind of like the next thing, like we prescribe glasses every day. It's kind of like you don't even think about it anymore. So a lot of doctors that I talk to, when we try to do the medical model in their practice, I say, you have this. You're able, just got to get a little bit of confidence and set up your own protocol. And it's easy to do. And you go to the next step. And then once you get comfortable, you figure out how to do your billing, and you see where your patient demographics and what they need in your practice. And then you can add technologies, add the next step to your practice. So there's a lot of things that I did and started small, and started with, just artificial tears, follow-up visits, and did billing, coding. Then I added anterior camera, pads in my office, hydrochloric acid for BLEF and things like that, small things, and started to grow my practice. And patients value that. They trust you. And that's also a way to kind of keep them in your practice too.
Yeah. Jen, I'm a firm believer that every patient that walks through my door has a need for two things. Glasses, everyone gets glasses, and everyone gets dry eye treatment, because the whole world has it. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, if you look at a digital device, you're going to get dry eyes. If you age, you're going to get dry eyes. If you do anything in this world, you need glasses, whether they're sunglasses outdoors, whether they're computer glasses in front of the computer. So for me, it's mandatory that we have that conversation in the exam room. And my technicians really start to tee that off prior to me even getting into the exam room with my patients. And, it's something that I've been doing since I started practicing, for the most part, simply because my mother has rheumatoid arthritis. So she's always had dry eyes. So it's something that's been close to me. So for me, everyone has that conversation. Everyone understands it. Everyone gets some type of treatment, whether it's just the basic 20-20-20 rule, an artificial tear, prescription medication, something of some sort to make sure that they're living their best life with their eyes and taking care of the dryness that's there.
I totally agree with you. I would say, so we have a very similar demographic. A lot of people that are in biotechnology or medical professions, probably average age is around 31 or 32 in my practice. So they're young people. I'm not coming in with debilitating dry eye for the most part, where it's like covered in SPK. But what I do find is that they have visual complaints. These are people that come in and tell me, I'm having trouble seeing. And they read the 20/20 line on the chart and the AR plus a quarter, and we trial frame, a little bit of SIL or whatever I find, and like, oh, that looks worse than nothing. I'm like, so you're seeing great. And earlier in my career, I'd been like, nothing's wrong with you, everything's fine. Now I know they're seeing great. They don't need glasses. I'm like, doctor,
everyone gets glasses. You, and you.
But they do need my care. And then we switch that conversation to, let's check for something else that can cause you to feel like you're not seeing well. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to people who don't think that they have dry eye, watery eyes. And on their intake form, they'll answer no to all those questions. But they are coming in because they have blurry vision. Dry eye is a vision disease as well. And a lot of my blurry vision patients end up with a dry eye diagnosis.
And something I love to do, I love that you brought that, the refraction state to it, is that whenever I'm doing a refraction, I always have my patients blink in between, going back and forth between 1 and 2. And then at the end of the refraction, I'm like, yeah, you got dry eyes. Every time you blinked, you could tell everything was sharper and clearer. And you're like, yeah, how about that, Dr. Glover? And then I jump right into it, so it makes a world of difference by just having that conversation, letting them know these little clues that could be potentially dry eyes, and just really building upon that as well. Dr. Sayan, how about yourself, man? Let's hear about it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I learned right in the beginning, and I've heard over and over, I've had conversations with dry eye experts like Sal and Richard Maharaj and others up here in Canada who are big names. The number one thing, if we want to start super simple, the number one thing you can do is implement a dry eye questionnaire for every single patient that steps in the door. Every single one, whether you've seen them before or they're brand new to your office. We use one called the DEQ5, which is 5 questions. And it's fairly straightforward there. The way they word the questions can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So staff might need to step in just to kind of clarify things. But you just look at the score. You have a threshold number, whether it's 6 or 8 or whatever you want to set it at. And that is entered into the EMR by the staff. And so when I sit down with the patient, I look at that number right away. And just like you said, I think, Jen, you're saying is like, if somebody says, you ask them if they have dry eyes on the intake form, they'll say no. But they have watery eyes, or their eyes sting, or their vision fluctuates, or whatever it is. And these all, as we know, are all related to dry eyes. And so we have that as just like the most simple, piece of proof to the patient. Like, you scored a 10 on this thing, which means, you're clearly suffering from something. And just starting from there, I feel like is the easiest way to start the conversation. But spending the time to have that conversation with the patient is extremely important. And I like to actually kind of go into what's causing the dry eye, the anatomy of it, the physiology of it. I like to show lots of photos or simulations on the computer, just so patients really get an understanding. Most of the time in that like 5-minute conversation, you'll see multiple like little light bulbs go off above their head about how like, oh, that makes so much sense with what I'm doing or how I'm feeling. And that's kind of the entry point into kind of talking about their dry eye treatment.
I want to expand on that timeline. You said 5 minutes. I'm curious, Dr. Lyerly, Dr. Sampalus, how long do you actually take to just educate your patient about dry eye and then also the treatment? Because I found in my practice, this could be a short, straight to the point conversation, or it can actually be something that can take forever to get across to the patient. So I'm curious, like, how long is that conversation taking place? Because, everyone is always about, glasses, contacts, got to get them out. And they're afraid to incorporate that medical model because they feel like it's going to take too much time. So I would love to just get, an overall view of how long it actually takes you in your practice to have this conversation.
So one of the things with me, I'm very to the point. What could be a good thing or bad thing, but I think with practice, it's good, right? So I think you kind of you get into the same flow of explaining it all the time, and you get efficient in doing it. And I also have visuals in the office that show that, and my staff knows too. So I can prescribe something, give them a pad and say follow up in a month. These are the drops I want you to take. This is why artificial tears are not going to be as helpful for you as these other drops. And then my staff is educated on it too. But within the medical model, it takes less time than a complete eye exam because it's problem-specific visits as well. And the staff is doing most of the workup. Like you said, the staff is doing it, Daryl, for you before you come in and you have it ready. And even the questionnaires are going to be helpful too to kind of get to the point. So these are all things that doctors can do in their practice and not take a lot of time away from the exam, not see the complete eye exam, sell glasses, because they need to do that for their practices, and because most of the patients need just routine care as well, but also focus on that instead of just saying, go to CVS and get artificial tears,
right.
And the patients continue to suffer. And then if they go to somewhere else for some reason, they're going to say, why did the other doctor not tell me this? So I think that's important too, for, patient retention and kind of, making yourself a little different than other practitioners in the area.
Yeah, Jen, I'd love to get some feedback from you, and we have some questions that I'd love to pop up on the screen so we can answer those as well.
So I mentioned earlier, like I talk. I feel like I talk a lot about dry eye, and my partner asked me the other day. She was like, "Jen, how many 5-minute eye exams do you think that you're seeing? We're trying to figure out if we can add more exams as we get to the end of the year." And I was like, 0. Every single person is like a 30-minute conversation. But I do have a few tips for people who feel like their dry eye conversation is going too long. One is find a quick and dirty diagnosis method. And so I already mentioned the DEQ. For me, I really, really love a tear breakup time. I can put a drop in, quick and dirty with fluorescein, and I can get a dry eye measurement. That's a number that a patient can't argue with or question. It's like a straightforward 1 through 10 score. Okay. And DEQ is the same way. So find a quick and dirty diagnosis measurement, and then don't talk about dry eye based on their symptoms at first. I found if you start talking to the patient about things before you ever evaluate them, you get more pushback. Wait until you've done your full assessment, check their vision, done this numerical score, and then say, we just found your problem. You have dry eye, and explain XXX. Give them 1 or 2 choices on treatment, and then out the door. And I found that if you present it that way and the patient knows that they've been thoroughly examined before you tell them, even if you know already based on their intake form they have dry eye, if they feel like they've been examined first, they question you and have less discussion about it.
I like it. I like it. Let's look at some of these questions we have. We have Dr. Sal asking, do you recommend blinking exercise for dry eyes? I think I could probably speak for everyone here saying that we all preach and practice the 20-20-20 rule for the most part.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like that's a baseline. Like any of my treatments are still going to require you to blink. So every person needs to have that conversation and understand that, hey, I'm going to prescribe you something to make you better, But if you don't change your behavior, it's never going to work. So they know that they have a job to do if they want their dry eye to feel better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another question that we have here from Dr. Carrie Ann. Are there any dry eye questionnaires that is electronic, one that you do not need to print?
Well, I can chime in on that one. These days, obviously, we're trying to limit patient time in the office and is limiting, direct interaction with patients to prevent any transmission of virus. But so we have a online intake form that we've set up that we email to every patient. And what we did is we just tacked on those 5 questions at the bottom. So it doesn't look like an official questionnaire. It's just 5 more questions at the bottom of the intake form that we email them. And most people will just fill it out as part of the question in the intake form. So that works well for us.
It looks like Dr. Sal he says, I have a free online on my dry eye relief.
Yeah, you got to check out Dr. Sal's app. Excellent.
Pretty good. All right. And it looks like there's another response here from the lovely Dr. Melanie Denton. Looks like there's an OSDI app for Apple products. So check that out. And there's some other information out there as well. How about you, Dr. Sampalis?
Yeah, everything's online with my EMR system. So same thing, it just added on. It's one of the questions that we ask. And, like I said, even if we screen on the phone, I make sure that my receptionist screen on the phone for what they're coming in for, whether it's routine or medical. And I know that's one of the things that a lot of doctors are concerned about is patients not knowing if it's vision care or medical. I think if you let the patients know ahead of time what they're there for and what plan is covered too, I think that's a big issue too with the medical model. So yeah, we screen on the phone as well and let them know. That's one point I think is important is patients understand that this is going through Blue Cross instead of a vision plan.
This is a really good thing to talk about because how do you handle that in your office? Do you tell them at check-in before they ever see you, or what happens if during the exam you decide it needs to go medical? How does that conversation happen?
Sure. So most of the time, the receptionists do a great job of educating the patient up front. We take both insurance cards. We ask them what they're coming in for. If it's a diabetic eye exam, we let them know ahead of time. They check the deductibles and things like that. We'll do the exam, and we'll say, today's visit, it goes by chief complaint. That's very important. So, if it is blurry vision and it's because of dry eye or because of cataracts, then it's a medical visit, and you have to educate your patients on that. I think it's once you train your patients in your office about that every year, there's no issue, there's no problem, because you are doing a more detailed, focused exam. Them. It takes more time than just a routine exam. But you're happy to do their routine exam once this problem's solved. You can do that. Or some doctors, what they do is sometimes they'll do a routine exam and they'll follow up and treat for the dry eye or other issues. But most of the time, if it's by chief complaint, it can be done. And there are some billing and coding issues that doctors question about with the medical model. But I think once you kind of get through that, and your staff is educated and your patients understand, I think it's a win for everybody, for the practice and for the patient with understanding and communication.
Yeah, same, Maria. I think you hit the nail on the head. And for me, it's one of those things where, I don't mind bringing a patient back to do a full-blown dry eye workup. But if the patient comes in and their eyes are bloodshot red and, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's 8 or above, I'm going to tell them, hey, this is going to be a medical office visit. That's the reason why they took your medical insurance up front. And the patients are okay with it simply because this has actually been an ongoing problem. And at that point, I can be very transparent and tell them straight up, look, this is going to take multiple visits. It's not going to happen overnight it's not going to get better overnight. So just as long as you've been experiencing this problem, we're going to have to work on it to get to the point where we can get a good refraction. Because if I check your prescription today, it may not be a valid prescription. So, just having that conversation, having that dialogue in the exam room just makes it easier to have the patient accept that they're going to have to bill out medical that day. I'm not going to lie. There are some patients that are just like, I haven't met my deductible. I'm not trying to do that, this, that, and the third. I can't please everyone. And I don't try. I try to please everyone, but I can't make everyone happy. So I'll tell the patient straight up, like, look, this is what we need to be successful with the eyes. It's up to you to figure out if you want to move forward or not. And if they don't, I'll go through with the refraction. I'll prescribe from the chair in regards to whatever medication may be needed, or talk about environmental factors or blinking activities, things of that nature, and we move forward. But for the most part, a lot of my patients, they get it, they understand it, and it's because we've had that conversation at the front desk. We've collected both insurances, and patients are able to move forward.
Yeah. What I found, because this high deductibles, this is a common issue, right? Like, it's not like their medical office visit is going to be a $20 copay. For most of these people, if you switch it to medical, they go from owing 15 to 115.
Yeah.
So if they are so dry, they have so much issue that I cannot get a good refraction, then obviously I explained to them during the exam, like, hey, we cannot do your glasses exam today. You couldn't see, as you saw. But if it's mild enough where it's like in the process of me, doing the slit lamp exam, I can tell, oh, you also have dry eye. I'll just do it as routine and then schedule them the follow-up visit. Pros and cons, I'm still diagnosing and treating something as an extra step that's not, getting me extra reimbursement from the routine exam. I've just found I've had less patient pushback when I do it that way.
Awesome. And Jen, we have a question from Jessica, which we've had on the podcast not too long ago. So if you want to take that one there.
She says, are there any other dry eye tests that you guys are routinely using other than an OSDI, or we mentioned a tear breakup time? Anything else that you guys use to diagnose?
You know what? One of the things that I preach, because I'm kind of in the earlier stages of really developing our dry eye practice, is that you don't need to begin. You really don't need anything fancy. If you're just a general practicing optometrist, you have everything you need on hand already. You got your slit lamp, you got your vital dyes, you got whatever you need to actually diagnose the dry eye up front. But touching the glands, kind of giving them a press to try to express them a little bit, is always an easy way to kind of determine if there's MGD. Looking really closely, that's probably the number one thing, is just actually looking for it, and then doing the questionnaire, I find is great. But there's a lot of cool tools out there, toys out there. I'm excited I'm looking for something that can kind of do non-invasive tear breakup and look for the tear meniscus and kind of measure all those things, and maybe mybography, a tool that can kind of do all of those things for me. Those are handy. I feel like those are just extra things. I don't think you need them to start.
Have any of you guys practiced with mybography and have any?
Yeah, so I've looked at it for my practice because I've been trying to expand a little more, and I find that I'm getting a lot of patients interested. I just haven't done it yet. It's an out-of-pocket thing, so there's no reimbursement on it, and some of the dry eye stuff is like that, so that's fine. But right now, there's other things I want to add to my practice that I can increase revenue from insurance standpoint, with AMD and things like that. So right now I'm on hold on that. But I did do something simple of a software. It's kind of like AI for anterior seg, and it kind of just like get that patient that comes back, says they didn't get any better from what the treatments you gave them. You can say, well, this is what we found last time, because you can do your testing and you notice the patient says everything's, you're noticing things are better, but patient's like it's not. But then you show them an image or something like the software and says, look, this is what it was last time. This is what it is today. You are improving. We're getting better. It might need a little more time to get, so you can kind of show them that your treatment's working, so they don't fall out as well.
And that's where the tear lab comes into play, right? People like to see that number, and when they can see that number, it's easier to track and they can understand it. And I don't know if it's a psychological thing that goes along with it as well, but you get to your numbers are better, and they're like, I can tell my dry eyes are better as well. So I mean, there's tons of different things out there.
Yeah, I think it's also like if we take like retinal photography, right? Patients see it. You say, look, everything looks good, and then they see it. It verifies it. Or you're following a heme, and then you follow up in a month, and it's gone, and it's fine. I think patients are happier that way to see it too, but also that you're investing in the latest as well.
I have a love-hate relationship with mybography. I practiced with it for a few years. It is amazing what you can see, and people that you don't even really pick up during the exam that they're going to have a dry eye issue, you'll be shocked at the amount of gland loss an asymptomatic patient can have. And the fact that you get intervened so early, shows them that before they ever even have symptoms, is amazing. What I disliked about practicing with it is that same thing you guys were just talking about. it never gets better. It does not improve. So you've got someone who sees that image, and even if you explain to them, like, okay, the goal is so that it doesn't get worse, they still want to get their picture taken again, and they want to see, is it better? And they get frustrated that it's not ever going to look better. And so I think having a device that can at least take some other measurables as well that will show improvement is really important, because if you just have the picture, it can almost be deflating to a patient to see like, oh yeah, it's the same, even though that's the whole point.
Yeah, I can see that as well, Jen. I mean, the thing is with dry eye, you know, a lot of patients that come in and they really suffer from it, they lose confidence because they've been to several doctors and they've had the same complaint and no one has addressed it, or they just gave them some artificial tears and said life will be great and told them to keep it moving. And they've probably been through 4 or 5 different doctors. So when they find a doctor that is, you know, ready to make it happen and they see that same image, then yeah, it can really make them lose some confidence and look at it a little differently. So I get what you're saying. That's a tough one.
Well, let's talk about treatments. And we've been throwing around a lot. Obviously, we were talking about 20/20 blink conversations and some of the things we talked about. But in your office, if a patient has dry eye that needs treatment, what are you typically doing for those patients that are needing like treatment for mild to moderate? We'll leave out like the severe, like, oh my gosh, you need an membrane conversation, because I know those are extreme cases.
Yeah, I've had Bruder pads in my office. I have omega-3s for dry eye in my practice. You know, we have we prescribe Restasis if needed. So I've done a lot of that. And then I've been doing some anterior seg photos as well, just to show them how it's changed as well. But that's just, and then punctal plugs as well. That has been a great thing in my practice, and all these things are great reimbursements for your practice as well. So this is a great way to build your practice if you want to build it, and it's not a big investment.
Sandy, that was a great idea, by the way. I appreciate that feedback. So I wanted, y'all skipped me. I got distracted for a second. I had a follow-up question I was going to ask you, Maria, about something that you were using, but omega-3s, that's what it was. Did the DREAM study influence you guys at all about discussing omegas as a treatment for dry eye?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research on it because I didn't know anything about it when I first started my practice, and I wanted to explain to my patients. So yeah, some stuff has like that has helped. And then I kind of researched which companies have the different products and what works. So I picked Nordic Naturals for my practice.
Well, I would love to hear more about the DREAM study. I know, Jen, you're an opto nerd, so go ahead and break it down, because I know you got all the stats and all the information about it.
Okay, this is off the cuff, so I don't have the stats pulled up. But basically, they compared a placebo of just taking a spoonful of olive oil versus people taking omega for dry eye. Patients were still allowed to use their artificial tears or any other dry eye prescriptions they had been given. And they found that there was no statistically significant difference. And the olive oil placebo was not supposedly going to give enough omega to have actually caused any sort of dry eye treatment.
Right.
I will say, though, in practice, my patients that take a dry eye supplement do get better. Like, I've seen it work. I've seen the difference. I've seen my patients experience it. And that one study result, after the results I see in my chair with patients improving their tear breakup scores from like 5 to 8, 9, 10, I'm like, okay, these supplements are working because they haven't started any other medication.
Right.
Wasn't there, I mean, maybe the little bit of pushback that maybe the olive oil potentially could have had some kind of an impact actually, so maybe it's not the right placebo to use. But at the same time, I mean, there's this sort of existential argument about like, if it's a placebo and it works, so who cares? Just give
Everybody
it anyway,
got
right?
better, so hey,
Right? If
fabulous.
people are getting better, then so you're not, if you're helping and not hurting, placebo or not, I mean, I think it's worth giving. It has not stopped me from recommending omegas. It's always on my list of things that I recommend. And I have a little prescription pad that I designed, just whatever made online. And I rip it off like an actual prescription. And I, write things down and circle it, and omega's on there, just like printed on, and I just check it off every time. I actually try to make recommendations for specific amounts of like EPA that they should be taking versus the number of omegas that you should be taking, because we all know that there's going to be variations in quality and content. So I'll say, you know what, don't just look at how much omega is in one capsule or one teaspoon, look at how much EPA is in there. and then try to use that as a target of how much you should be taking in a day. But definitely always on my list.
Fantastic. Yeah, when I'm recommending anything, I took a page out of Dr. Lyerly's book where I'll just pull up the image on my computer and let them take a picture of it, because I know they'll never lose that image and just be able to run with it. And plus, my handwriting is horrible. I don't want anyone to try to have to read that. So it's just easier to move forward that way.
Well, the with the RX pad thing, it's already printed on there. I'm just checking stuff off and circling it. And it makes it a bit more, I've just found this from my experience with it, it just makes it a bit more official. And so when I hand them that and I say, okay, now when you go up to the front, the staff will fill this for you essentially.
Fantastic.
And so the goal is to not, for them to not leave and buy it at the drugstore, is to buy it, not just, I don't want to go too far into this, but like, obviously it's the bottom line is better when they buy it from us, but it's really because the compliance is higher and I know what they're getting, actually, which product they're using. So I know that the treatment is going to be better. Ultimately, it's better for the patient. So I think that works pretty well.
I say let's go far with it, man. That's what we're here. We're talking about real world stuff, man. Let's hear it. What else do you have, Dr. Javier? Let's hear it, man.
Yeah, what else is on your tear sheet?
Yeah.
All right. There's 5 or 6 things. Like, number one is remove all your makeup, kind of giving you an order of things that you should be doing. Remove your makeup, the warm compresses, and I got little sections on how many times in a day or for how many minutes. Lid scrubs or lid hygiene, and I'll make a note of how many times in a day and which specific product I'd like them to use. Eye drops, so I'll circle artificial tears or whatever, and then I'll write the specific name of the drop, because as we know, for different types of dry eye, we're going to recommend different types of eye drops. And we carry, I don't know, at least 6 or 8 different types of drops. And I'll be honest with you, if I was me from a year ago was listening to me right now, me from a year ago would be like intimidated, like 6 or 8 eye drops, I got to carry that many different types. But we started with 1, and then we had 2 or 3, then we had 4 or 5, and we just kept slowly adding it. I think Maria was saying start small. And that's been huge. And now I love it because patients love when I can be very specific and say, for the type of dry eye that you have, the severity of that you're dealing with, here is the specific drop that's going to help you the most. And I'll write the name down. And I used to do what you were doing, Daryl, where I'd say, here's a picture, or take a picture of the screen. And then at least I thought, well, when they go to the drugstore, they'll buy the right one. But there's no guarantee they'll even make it to the drugstore. So
very true.
Buy it from us today, and we know your compliance will be higher.
Yeah.
Daryl, I'm actually in the process of making a tear sheet right now at my office. So I am switching gears to what Javier is doing too.
Well, I let Jen do it first, and then I take it after. So I'm looking forward to seeing that sheet, Jen.
Well, listen, I made it on Canva. So Canva's great for all these different things. But I'm more than happy, anybody who's watching or any of you guys, if you want it, I'll send it to you, right? And I'll show you what it looks like. If I can send you somehow the raw, thing that you can edit yourself, I'm happy to send it. Or send me your logo. I'll just switch out the logo from mine on the top to yours, and I'll send it back to you.
And you'll send them a bill, right?
Yeah. With the bill,
So we're going to talk about in-office treatments coming up next, but first we're going to take a short commercial break from our sponsor and watch this awesome smooth transition. Okay.
The Systane iLux system is a device designed to treat patients with meibomian gland dysfunction, or MGD. It is the leading cause of dry eye. Dry eye is caused by deficiencies in the quantity and quality of meibum or other tear components within the tear film. Around 30 million people are estimated in the United States to suffer from dry eye symptoms. According to a study, 86% of dry eye sufferers are reported to have clinical signs of meibomian gland dysfunction. Healthy meibomian glands produce clear and liquid meibum. Dysfunctional glands produce meibum that is either cloudy or thick and paste-like. In some cases, the glands do not express any meibum when compressed. This may indicate fully blocked, capped, or damaged glands. The Systane iLux system allows eye care professionals to target dysfunctional glands and improve signs and symptoms of MGD using localized heat followed by compression therapy. To clear the glands, the eye care professional positions the Systane iLux device on the eyelid and applies light-based heat to melt the meibum. Compression of the lids after heat therapy allows the eye care professional to express the unhealthy meibum. When the blockage is cleared from the unhealthy glands and/or clear, Healthy meibum is seen on the lid margin. The procedure is complete.
All right. I
All
want
right, we're
to
back.
back out because we're talking about treatments, in-office treatments, kind of some of the things we want to discuss here next you guys might be offering. But my good friend Jessica had a great question, and she wanted to know if you guys have a go-to treatment regimen that pretty much across the board you follow for patients presenting with a moderate stage of dry eye, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, for me, just anyone that I get started with anything, I always start with an aggressive preservative-free artificial tear, follow with a nice gel drop at night before they go to bed, and of course, lid scrubs. I think that's a good starting point. And also talking to them about just staying hydrated and monitoring their environments. I think a lot of folks don't really look at the environmental piece, ceiling fans, vents, whether it's your work setting, your bedroom, things of that nature. That's one piece that can always get left out. And a lot of times when I have that conversation with my patients and they go home and they come back for that month follow-up, they're like, Dr. Glover, I just realized that I've been sleeping with my ceiling fan for my entire life. And that's the main culprit that's been drying my eyes out. So just giving them a little education about looking at their environment helps out tremendously. But that's the approach that I take before getting into, steroids and, Xiidra, Restasis, and things of that nature for the most part.
Yeah, so I'll start with that as well, but I'll also add in like a Bruder pad, and I'll say, do this and then put the drops in and go to bed, and you'll notice different changes because of that. And then I'll say we'll follow up in about a month and we'll consider plugs, and then we can also start after that. And I tell them, like, if you're not happy, we still have other options, but these are the steps we have to take to do that. So they know that, if they're not satisfied, it's not the end all. So there's more that we can do. So plugs I've done as well, and patients are pretty happy with that as well. And then the next step would be, Xiidra, Restasis, Cequa, after that. And then if it continues, there's other things as well.
I'm a little bit different than you guys. If they have been using any artificial tear at home, I immediately go to a prescription eye drop next. And I'll just kind of say to them, like, hey, you've already tried those over the counters. We've been there, done that. I'm going to get you on medicine right away. And there's something about that aggressive approach that I think the patients are like, oh, okay. And I actually, at the follow-up visit, I have a lot of people cancel their follow-ups because they'll say, like, I'm feeling great. I don't want to come back in. My eyes have never felt better. But the good thing is I always schedule them a follow-up visit in 6 weeks. And at that visit, let's say we're not getting the results we want. Let's say that drop tasted so bad or burned so bad that they can't use it. And what else do I have, doctor? And so that's when we'll start talking about, all right, well, punctal plugs. If there's a lot of inflammation, maybe I need to do a round of steroids first, or like looking at some of these other more heat treatments that are in the office as the next step. But I really like killing the inflammation with a non-steroidal prescription drop right from the start. And with most people with commercial insurance, it's actually very well covered. I mean, if they're paying out of pocket for even Restasis, even though it's 17 years old, they are not going to be happy. So if you're going that approach, you're going to have someone with insurance.
Yeah. See, for me, I like the artificial tear approach because it gets me squared away for that follow-up visit, because in the office it's very, high volume. So just kind of having that generic approach to go and then get them back to spend a little more chair time with them for the dry eye, and also get a medical office visit on top of that. That's where we win in regards to our practice. But there is something about being able to prescribe and hit them with that big shot at one time, and they look at you as the hero because they've been to several doctors that didn't do anything at all.
I actually don't know where to start to answer this question. It will really depend on.
You take the hybrid approach. You do a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
right?
Basically, I had all the time to think about it while you guys were talking, but I actually was really interested in what you guys do. It really depends on the type of dry eye patient that I'm seeing. But we know that, for the numbers show, it's 86% is the number that we know people have some amount of MGD in their dry eye, right? And then also take into account the type of dry eye patients that you tend to see. I think based on my assessments, it's probably higher, but maybe 90+% of the people I see have some amount of MGD. It's rare that I see someone that's like strictly aqueous deficient. So I'm looking at that, and I'm always treating the MGD first. And so that means almost immediately I take out that prescription pad and I say hot compress, lid wipe, Omega, and then I'll determine what type of eye drop I want them to use. And it is usually artificial tears before going to anything medicated, unless I know that they've been using something that I would normally have suggested already and it hasn't worked. And I know there's a debate going back and forth about preserved versus non-preserved. And obviously we'd like to think preservative-free is better. I was speaking at the Dry Eye Summit this past weekend, and a lot of the docs there they only do non-preservative or preservative-free, whereas I'm actually comfortable giving the preserved eye drop, a certain type of drop if it's needed. Specifically, if I know that they're lacking that oil on the surface, I'll probably suggest something like a Systane Complete that has the oil component to it, and I'm okay with them using that preservative drop if I know it's kind of a milder dry eye. The second I feel like it's more severe, I'll jump up to a preservative-free, and there's a couple of newer drops that work pretty well for MGD type of dry eyes, more severe dry eyes. But one thing I have to say, sorry if my answer is super long, sometimes, a lot of times now, I'm actually like hitting the home run right out the gate, where I'm like, here's what I recommend. Here's my full, complete, holistic look. I keep hitting my microphone. I'll start with saying, I'd like you to have at least 2 treatments of Ilux. I'd like you to use the Bruder mask. I'd like you to do this and this and this, right? And I want you back for that second treatment of Ilux on this date. And then we're going to have these follow-up plans, everything kind of planned out. So that's actually a conversation I have very frequently now. And that takes longer than the 5 minutes, Daryl, but it's worth it because I know I'm giving that patient this approach that they've never heard of before and going to treat their dry eye in a way that they haven't, had the opportunity to have it treated. And it doesn't hurt because it's better for the bottom line. So that extra 10 minutes in the office, in the exam room turns into, a lot more as far as revenue.
Sure. We have a great question here from Dr. Sandy. Do you ever prescribe any videos to watch at home after the appointment to solidify the in-office explanation that you've created, or some other common treatment options? I mean, this is great, especially in the current world that we live in. We know everyone loves to use their cell phone and they love to go to YouTube and see more information or learn more about it. Are you guys using any type of videos in your practice?
Unfortunately, not at this point, no. I've done some blogs on my website and things like that, but I've not.
That's a great idea.
It's a good point.
While we were playing that Systane Ilux commercial, I checked my text messages and it was from a videographer, and I'm planning to shoot video for this type of stuff. So it's definitely high on our priority list right now. I think it's an amazing idea.
And I know earlier, Javier, you mentioned something about Ilux. We have a great question from Dr. Sal. I mean, how do you discuss this with your patients, and do you have any practice pearls or scripts that you can share with us?
My answers are already really long, and I feel like this would be a super long one if I went through, but it's a pretty long spiel. I typed it up for my associate.
Let me tell you this. You cannot talk longer than Jen or I. We both talk too much. So we're going to give someone else the platform to run their mouth. So run with it, man. It's all yours, baby. It's all yours.
Well, I'll try and give you the super short version here, though. But like the other day or a couple weeks ago, because I was getting a lot of patients to sign up for the Ilux compared to my associates and my business partner, they were like, okay, you have to tell us like word for word what you say. So I literally word for word typed it up, and I cannot tell you how long that email was. I highly recommend, and I learned this from actually reaching out to colleagues and sitting down, having hour-long conversations with them about, please tell me exactly what you say. I'll tell you exactly what I say. You tell me where I need to change things around. And one thing I found is not necessarily what you say, how you say it is more important. So we're all doctors. We all know the medical side of it. We all know what's good for our patients, but positioning it, oh man, who did you guys have on your podcast who was like, it's about like connecting with that emotion of the patient, right? But how you position it. And so I used to say, okay, well, you could do the hot compress and so on. So if it doesn't work, you can come back and we can talk about the Ilux. People either wouldn't come back, or when they came back, they were just like not that motivated. So when I present it now, I present if I know they need it, like this is only if a patient really needs it, I'll say the Ilux is the first line of treatment. then these other things are going to be the maintenance. This is how we're going to start your treatment. And and that's how I position it. And I find that patients are much more receptive to it. Kind of like you're saying, Jen, kind of a bit more aggressive approach, but in the words that a patient will understand.
So that's really great. I love that idea, because heat treatments, I think, is such a unique opportunity where we're really targeting the significant cause of dry eye in most of our patients. But I feel like integrating in-office thermal treatment in your practice, one, can be costly depending on the device you're using. And I think many doctors, if they have used it, may have been underwhelmed with the results. And so I think having the right wording to explain what's going to happen to the patient and what they should expect as their outcome. I say this because I practiced for several years with LipiFlow. And when we first brought LipiFlow into the office, our communication to our patients about what LipiFlow would do was not accurate in the actual results. And then, we learned later on, like, oh, it's not supposed to make you feel better. It's just supposed to not make things get worse. But we spent the first 6 months telling people, we're going to make your dry eye better. And then all of our patients were coming back like, it feels no better. You lied to me. And that left a sour taste in people's mouths. So it's all about presenting the technology with what it can actually accomplish. How do you find that you present iLux, for example, to make patients feel like, oh yeah, I do see the value from this?
So that's directly to me, Jen?
Sure. Does anyone else have iLux in their practice right now?
No, I don't, but I'm interested in learning more. Let's hear it.
So it all starts, actually, before I talk about treatment, it starts with the education, and that's where I think it's super important. So I'm showing, actually similar to the images that were in that commercial there, advertisement there, about, because I don't have the technology to image the patient's glands, in the office, but I'll show these generic images. I find that they work just as well, or pretty close to just as well. I'll show, here's what these pores in your eyelids are supposed to look like, and here's the kind of liquid or fluid I'd like to see them creating, and here's the other image. Here's kind of more like what it looks like for you. Instead of a clear fluid oil, that's instead of it that coming out, it's more thick and creamy, and it's just not spreading over the surface of your eyes very well. Since we know that's the root cause of the problem in this specific case, then treating that is what's going to help you in the long term and reverse this situation that we have here. And there's different ways that we can approach that. One of them is an in-office treatment that we offer. And it's, I usually have it sitting on the desk, and I say it's just this little handheld thing. It gently compresses and heats the glands to open the pores up and melt the oil and get things kind of restarted. And then we do this stuff at home, the hot compress and things like that, to maintain that, that reboot that we are doing in the office.
Marie, have you considered a heat treatment coming into your office as something that you add to your practice, or?
Yes, so I did have the iLux rep come in and show it to my practice, because as I'm growing my practice, I want to add, that's the next thing. And what I also asked for was, who else in this area has it? So nobody else has it right now in my area in Rhode Island. So, and then I asked, how far out are we? So, because it is a new technology, but it is also specialized. So that was how I looked at it as well. So it is something that I want to do in my practice, but right now with COVID, and right now I'm thinking we are going to have another shutdown, lockdown. I kind of wanted to wait a little bit on that, but I did have it. This rep came in, showed it to me, she did it on me. It doesn't hurt, and you could kind of feel it right away how the glands are expressed and into the tear film as well. And it's easy, so you can do it. And I guess if you get a good tech to train to do it, then they could do it as well. But it is how you present it too, because it is an out-of-pocket expense. So, but I think it's once you get through these steps and then you grow your practice, you kind of find out what's the next step. And for me, that is the next step, but also knowing who else doesn't have it in the area. So patients that really want it are going to come see me. And we, as optometrists, we all have websites, we all have social media. It's very easy to kind of get the word out now more than ever.
That's great. You touched on something, and before we close out, I would really love to know. You had mentioned COVID, right? What are you going to do if we get shut down again? I mean, are you guys utilizing telehealth? Because I feel like telehealth is a big piece that you can utilize when it comes to dry eye treatment. Do you have any plans in motion or protocols in regards to how you're utilizing that technology with dry eye patients?
Yeah, so that's a great point right there. So I have my EMR system does have that, but iCare Live is a good platform for that. And they originally came out with that for dry eye and contact lens follow-ups. But a lot of the new companies, like the software that I'm using for the dry eye for my practice as well, has a telemedicine component as well. And I think now with COVID, a lot of companies have a telemedicine component that's free to the doctors. So I think that's important too for the patients that kind of want to follow up. I think it's convenience too, and I think it's here to stay. And you got to be able to figure out how to incorporate it into your practice and continue to do that for patients that want convenience too. After you've seen them for follow-up visits and things like that, and things that don't take away from the office as well. So I think telemedicine is important, and it can be easily incorporated with dry eye.
I think, if worse comes to shove, obviously, if we're shut down, we're going to do telemedicine. I have found that since our offices have been reopened, except for like a contact lens check with no complaints, and they just want to finalize the trial that I gave them. Okay, that's fine. But everything else, if you have a question or concern for the doctor, like, I'm not sure this drop is working. At the end of the day, through telemedicine, I can make some guesses, but can I run that tear breakup time to see if it's actually improved? Maybe you just need to use it for a little bit longer. It really is getting better, but you don't feel it yet. Or do we need to totally switch strategies? I don't see how I'll ever be able to say, I'll transition to a telemedicine in any significant way if we could be open and I could actually evaluate my patient. Because it's just so hard to know what's truly working without running those tests again, pressing on the lid and seeing how their meibome's coming out. Everything else is truly just like, well, maybe this will work, and we're educated, we can make a good guess, but we might be still playing around in the dark a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at telehealth, I mean, I agree with everything that everyone's saying on this platform, right? I mean, and I'm not practicing it right now, but what I look at is, sometimes patients just want to talk, right? And sometimes just that conversation and that dialogue, it goes a long way. Patients love to just tell you what's going on, whether it's good or bad. And sometimes when you listen, that makes them feel better, So I could see it being used as that. But as far as being able to see that tear breakup time and some of the other stuff, I mean, there's some cool technology that's out there, and I'm pretty sure we'll see more apps that will be able to make that happen. I think we're not too far away from it, but it is difficult. You really have to pick your battles and figure out what's going to work the best for your practice and you as a physician.
I think, Daryl, you hit the nail on your head about that one. To me, what I've noticed in practice, especially as you get into a more severe stage of dryness, there is definitely a psychological component to the effects of this disease. And patients tend to have depression, anxiety. They do want to spend time talking to you. And this is what, when you talk to doctors that have been doing dry eye for a while and they get frustrated and like burnt out by it, this is why, because you're called upon not just for your scientific ability to treat a condition, but to emotionally take on all of the baggage and trauma and fears and concerns of that patient and like hold their hand and walk them through it. It is an emotionally taxing condition to treat. And telemedicine definitely could play a role in that and in dealing with the psychological aspect of this disease.
Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Perriman, I've been thinking about this all the time, but she, as part of her treatment in Seattle for dry eye, she does some CBD oil stuff. And so that might be, I would love to see a direction where we start dealing with that aspect of dry eye and the anxiety and the neurological component of it.
Good old Pacific Northwest. Hey, we're always turning to that.
I'll lead the charge.
By the way, it's Steve Vargo, the name I was thinking about, but he was talking more about selling, right, and connecting with the patient. I mean, can I chime in? Sorry, on something a little bit different. Just anybody who's, I know there's people out there. I recognize the names in the audience here who are pros and experienced in the dry eye realm and far beyond what I'm doing. But I also know that there's people out there who are kind of just starting out and want to kind of dabble or start to do more. You know, like I was saying, me from a year ago would be listening to me right now and being like, whoa, who's this guy? You know, and I have to say that a lot of what I'm doing and have learned to do has come from leaning on colleagues and reps. So whether you're, you know, getting something from Alcon or whether you're getting something from Allergan or whoever else it might be, everybody's got some kind of a program that's going to help you to kind of get on your feet and get things running. These companies, like for example, and I'll use Ilux as the example because I'm using it, but like LipiFlow and others, they all use consumables, right? So you use it once and you toss it. That's where ultimately that's where these companies are going to make more of their money. Is you have to be using the device and keep using the consumables and keep buying them from them. If you buy a device and it just sits and collects dust, it helps nobody. I mean, that initial sale, fine, but they want you to keep using it and keep selling it. So lean on your rep, and they usually will have a program. Sal mentioned it in the chat here. Alcon's got something called Deep Dry Eye Excellence Program, and I know other companies have their own versions, but they're there to help you get on your feet, help to set protocols, help to set fees, and understand all the different ways that you can start to get more people, feed more people into your dry eye practice. So don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. Just reach out and ask people. Call me, text me, message me, whatever. And I'm happy to give you my spiel and my, you know, whatever I say to patients to help you if that helps you get on your feet too.
Well, thank you guys so much. I learned a lot from talking with you as always, and some things that I immediately want to do differently starting tomorrow. So I'm sure we'll have a conversation about this again in the not too distant future, because this is a condition that continues to evolve and change. I know when we were all in optometry school, we definitely never knew about a thermal treatment for dry eye. And so who knows what another 5 years will bring us on this front. But y'all have a wonderful night. And thank you so much for everyone tuning in and sending in your questions and your feedback. We learned just as much from you guys as we did talking to ourselves.
Have a great one, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
All right, colleagues, and it's a wrap. Thank you dearly for hanging out with the D-Focus Media team. We hope truly something resonated with you. And if it did, be sure to give us 5 stars. And make sure you follow us on all social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you named it. And our handle is at D-Focus Media on all platforms. And until next time, be sure to keep it 2020. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.